All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi brachas, Perek Vav, Halacha Vav. In the Ois V'Hader's edition, we're going to be learning today Daf Samach Ches. We're beginning on Daf Samach Zayin Amid Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Indeed, by the beginning of this halacha, by the beginning of the mission. Now, first of all, we have a rule of Shemei Kohen, compounded with there is a concept of Berov Am Hadras Melech, and therefore, theoretically, when people are gathered together, and let's speak about our topic of making brachas prior to eating, making brachas after eating, one should make the bracha, everyone else should be yoitza through the medium of Shemei Kohen, and like this you have Berov Am Hadras Melech. And theoretically, indeed, that's the way it should be. However, what the Mishnah is going to introduce is that if you have a group of people that are halachically, we'll define that in a moment, not really associated one with the other, they happen to be sitting together. There, we don't say Shemei Kohen when it comes to Birchas Hanahenim. There, we do say everyone has to make their own bracha pre and post. So the question will be, what will be the criteria that will define people that are actually together? And when will we say that even though that they are physically sitting in the same room, they are not considered together? And as the Mishnah will use the words, if they are yoshvin, everyone has to make their own bracha pre-post. We'll define that in a moment. But if they are heisevu, if they are reclining, then that's considered that they're gathered. And we're going to right away learn the Charedim, who applies the concept of reclining, which is not something we do nowadays, to how do we apply that to when people gather to eat now? But the concept will be the same. Sometimes everyone has to make their own bracha. Other times, not only could one make it for the other, but really because of B'Rav Am Hadras Melech, one should make it for the other. Just want to mention that unlike the bracha prior to eating, which until today, that's exactly what happens, for example, by Shabbos around your table, Hamoitzi. Dafka one for all. Birchas Hamazon, as of a certain point, it's not being made by one for all. That's because people don't have the capacity of listening and concentrating to every single word. Shemei Kohen works if you're Shemei every single word. So that's another topic that we're not going to address. We're going back to the taking away the limitations that we have nowadays. When people are able to have kavanah, the chiddush will be that if you're not halachically together, we don't say Shemei Kohen. Everyone has to make it on their own. Now, this will be fascinating because we're going to actually learn not just about the reclining, and we'll see how we apply that today, but we're going to have a brayso in the Gemara that's going to pasha tell us the formal way of how people ate in the times of Chazal. A meal was very different than the meals that I would say an American is accustomed to. People here, I think nowadays they eat very often, but they don't eat properly. They chap in Yiddish, they grab a bite, they take a sandwich. There was a whole seder. There was the gathering of people before they came to the dining room. What was served, imagine, in another environment, meal, like a shemagas board, and that was a normal thing. Then there was the meal itself, and even in the meal itself, we're going to speak more about the parperas that used to be served prior to the washing, and then the actual watching. We're going to just ask him, Morris, you can leave that because it's an hour before davening. Not to do this now, that would be helpful. Yeah, and that we're going to go from there to the concept of shinoi. Now, what I mean is, like, guys, these are big ideas. After we're going to learn how they used to gather in one environment. Then they would go on to eat in another environment. However, we have to know this, that if a person makes a brach in one place and then they change their location, not so simple. Not so simple. You can't just keep on eating there. Actually, before you change your location, you have to actually bench before you make a Shinui Makom. So we're going to open up the topic of Shinui Makom, and what's going to be amazing is we're mamash going to go me'ingen le'ingen to Hilchas Sukkah, and as we'll speak out when we learn the Sugya, that today b'chutz la'aretz, not only today, but b'chutz la'aretz, when there is a suffix, and later the minig avosenu b'yodenu concerning Shmini Atzeres, right? Like we eat in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. We just don't make a bracha, because there used to be a doubt, and Shmini Atzeres might have been the seventh day. In Eretz Yisrael, wherever we know when Yom Tov is, Sukkot begins with one day Yom Tov. You have then all the subsequent days. Hoshana Rabbah is a very special day, but it's not a Yom Tov. You're mutter in doing malacha. When do we make Kiddush? Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres, not a suffix. Shmini Atzeres in Eretz Yisrael is like the last day. Shmini Atzeres is a day in which one is not allowed to eat in the Sukkah. Number one, you could not be violating Bal Tosef, because you're adding to the mitzvah. God said sit in the Sukkah for 7 days, not for 8 days. And as we'll speak out when we learn the Sugya, that if a person doesn't have kavanah to be yoytze the mitzvah, they're not violating Bal Tosef, but there is a marasayin. It looks like they're adding another day to the Sukkah, and we're going to read about one of the, it's going to lead us in to one of the solutions might be that if you have no other place other than to eat in the Sukkah, make Kiddush in your house, and then go eat in the Sukkah. And there's no marasayin, because it's clear the fact that you made Kiddush in your house, that you're not saying you have to eat in the Sukkah. All of that is the Shinui Makom. We'll see how far we can get into the Sukkah. The problem will be, how could you make Kiddush in one place and then keep on drinking wine in another place? I'm not even talking about Kiddush Makom Seudah, that we'll also touch upon today. But we're going to touch a lot about this concept of Shinui Makom, all coming back to the topic of the Mishnah. So, without any further ado, Daf Samach, Zayin Amud Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid, we're starting with the Mishnah. It says the Mishnah like this, that if people are only yoshvin, if people are only sitting, which means that halachically we do not consider them to be people that are eating together. Physically, they are in their same environment. Physically, one can hear the other. But there's no halachic togetherness. We'll expand upon that in a moment. If you don't have that, we don't say, Ravam Hadras Melech, let one make for all. We don't say that. What do we say? Kol echad v'echad mevarach la'atzmai. And this kol echad v'echad mevarach la'atzmai is both bracha prior to eating and bracha post eating, even when there's no issue with kavanah. Okay. Now, when do we say, no, they're together? B'lashon HaMishnah, hey sevu. Now we know this from the Seder, that in those days, we'll see noch clearly in the Braise, even in the days of Chazal, they had some sort of chairs. But if they would sit down for a snack, they would sit on the chair. We're going to learn. When they would have their pre-meal meal, they would sit on a chair or on a bench. That we have benches. Line, that was the way they expressed, we're together. We're having a su'uta together. Hey, sevu, together. Then kol echad mevarach l'kulam. Like we mentioned, number one is able to make the bracha for the others because of Shemei HaKoina. And number two, if you are able, better because of Ravam Hadras Melech. Now, the question is, at some point, especially Jews that in Europe, there's no more reclining. So how do you apply that? Number one. Number two, the bigger question is, it's not enough what the Mishnah says. Of course, it's enough, but in there's a lot that has to be unpackaged. Because what are you talking about? When people sit together, isn't their kavanah important? And it is. No, it's the intent of the people gathering is a big part of this Mishnah. And let's read inside the whole Charedim. There's enough time. It's small dafim, we can learn the Charedim. Says the Charedim, you write in the Mishnah, that's the second, third, the second widest line. Masnisim. So says the Charedim, not stam sitting reclining. No. You're missing what Rabbeinu HaKadosh is saying. That the Yoshvu stam, they sat stam, meaning we're not talking about people that said, let's go have lunch together. That's different. If you make that statement, it's always considered reclined. It happened to be that they were sitting together, meaning it's a very important rule. Then yeshivasam have a keva kehesevu. Sitting is like reclining. Big rules. Another rule. Next charedim, heisevu, says the charedim darkam haya What was their minig then? They would recline together on beds. Al tzidin hasmali on their left side, and v'oichlen v'shoisen b'hasev. Now the Gemara, he's quoting from the Bavli Brachas Tafman Beis. That if people are traveling, and they say, let's eat food in that place. We're hungry. Oh, we're going to have lunch in 30 minutes. We're going to get to that exit. We'll stop there. We'll eat there. That statement is Kehesivu Dami. Even then, because when they were traveling, they didn't have what to recline on. See, the Charedim was just reiterating. In other words, Yoshvin and Esevu means a lot more than what it sounds like. It's about, was there kavana to eat together? If you designate a place to eat together, it's like Esevu. Whether you reclined, whether you sat. Okay? If they say the words, Neshiv lechol kan, let's eat here. Okay. Umas nisan. Another din, what is our Mishnah talking about? Which brachas? Like we said, both pre and post. Bein b'hamoitzi, bein b'birchas hamazon ma'id. When it comes to hamoitzi, how many people do you need for one to do it for others? Only two. One can say, one can answer. Okay? Because we have the rule, according from a Masechta Rosh Hashanah, by Birchas Hanahanan, if I was not to yoitzi yet, because if I want to eat bread and I didn't yet make the bracha, I can make it for you, moitzi. And now we have to put that Mishnah with this Mishnah. What are we learning over here? That even though theoretically I can make a bracha pri for you, that's only behesevu. Behesevu means reclining. Behesevu means we made up to eat together. Behesevu made up nezel nechel sham, neshav lechol kan. What we see from our Mishnah is that if you didn't have this designation of eating together, even if not only Shemei HaKohen, it says the Charedim more, there's another din of Amen. Amen, according to some Girsois that we had before in the Yerushalmi, Amen is not only Ke'oin, it's Oina Mamish. Still won't help. Now, nowadays, the Ein Noi Hagen Lechel B'Haseva. So says the Charedim, Yeshiva Shalonu ala Shulchan, sitting around a dining room table is like Haseva. Yeah. But if people are Oichlin Oimdin, or they're Oichlin Hoilchin, that's the whole point. Imagine people are walking. In the middle, they're thirsty, so you pass around water. That's the whole word. You cannot make Shemei Ka'ina. So just put it in the application.
Everybody's on their phone, table.
So David is saying a good point that could be, again, theoretically, that even when people are said, let's eat together, the disease that there's very little together now, you can have a family around the table, everyone is on their stupid phone. Could be you can't make a bracha one for all. Could be. No, there has to be a certain type. That's why the reclining, there's a certain type of togetherness that happens around food. Right? Gedoyle legima, the Gemara says, I think in Sanhedrin, shemikareves. Why Hasidim fabring. Okay. So that's, now we got the opening of the Mishnah. Now let's go to Daf Samaches on top. Says the Mishnah, Bolehem yain b'toich hamozain. So what are we talking about over here? Says the Pnei Moshe. Look on the Pnei Moshe on the top. Even though people are eating together, even though we just said that behaseva, hesevu echad mevarach for everyone, not by the wine in middle of the meal. So guys, obviously we learned in the previous Mishnah, if wine was given before the meal, you don't have to make a bracha again. We're speaking about the case where no wine was brought before the meal. In middle of the meal, they bring wine. Whether they're drinking it for pleasure, whether they're drinking it only to help you digest the food, it makes no difference. For wine, you have to make a bracha even though you made a hamoitzi. And on this, he says that during the meal, while you're eating, right, you can't talk whenever you want. You're going to choke. And therefore, they're not focused on the one making the bracha. What are they focused on? To swallow what's in their mouths. So here we say, Chayshinan, Shema Yechane, Kishabola Anis Amen. So it's another thing. In other words, Heisevu, you can make a bracha, not in the middle of the meal. What bracha comes in the middle of the meal? It's just that wine. That will be the Metzias. La'achar Hamazon goes right into the wine. In other words, again, we learned this yesterday, once they remove the little food table, It means they will not be eating anymore. That's when you know no one has food in their mouth. If now they brought the wine and no wine was brought before, now they have to make a bracha. Yeah, that's the word. Back to Heisevel. So echad mevarech lekulam. Final din in the Mishnah. Yeah, but I'm saying echad mevarech lekulam. I just said in the intro that the reason why nowadays everyone benches, Alter Rebbe says, is because we don't have the capacity to have kavan. Theoretically, the one who would bench wouldn't only say the words of the zimun, he would say the whole benching. Now, there's one other thing, and that is that the norm used to be that after they finished the meal, they would pass around mugmar. Mugmar is a certain incense upon which you make a bracha. The Mishnah now is speaking about mugmar that was not passed around after the meal. For whatever reason, it was passed around during the meal. Now we're learning a whole different din. In the cases where echad mevarach lekulam, that person becomes the first in the subsequent brachas if they exist, which will be mugmer. That for oimer, no, it's the one who made the bracha in the beginning. In the case, let's go to the normal hamoitzi. The one who made the hamoitzi, if mugmer was brought during the meal, we make a bracha. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher nasan reach toiv. That's how we say ba'atzei psamim. That was the bracha that they made a mugmar. He should be the one making the bracha for everyone. Even though normally mugmar was brought at the end, and guys, in the norm, when mugmar is brought at the end of the meal doesn't mean after benching. It means when they took away the tables. Then we don't say the one that made hamoitzi should make the mugmar. No, because hamoitzi was he opened up the bracha during the meal. Now it's after the meal. So even though if mugmar would have been brought after the meal, we wouldn't have applied this rule. If mugmar was brought unusually early, then we say if there's heisevu and one made a bracha for all, whoever made hamoitzi should be the one making the bracha on the mugmar. So ends the Mishnah. Now, says the Gemara. Now that we learned the ikir, the reish of the Mishnah is teaching us the din that there is a difference between individuals happening to be sitting together. Halachically, we say, they're not together. Versus heisevu, they are a group, even of two. For birchas hanehen prior, right? For benching, you have to have three. For hamoitzi, you only have to have two. Then one makes for the other. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Shua ben Levi Amar. Interesting expression. B'shavua habein. Let's go with the words week. What's shavua habein? So we're going to touch over here. Says the Pnei Moshe. B'suudas mila. And he says so also. Do we have in other places? Let's not speak about the night before the bris. Let's call this bris mila. That b'shavua habein he masnisa. That the reason why we say he's limiting more, that even though people are sitting together, they're not mamish together. Why are we saying that? He's addressing something important. Let's say no one said, let's eat here. No one said that. But people are gathered together. When are they not considered together? As an example, bris milah. What's by a bris milah? The bal habris is not necessarily by you. Many people are there. Many people are there. There is no togetherness if they don't recline. It's amazing how sometimes we know that when you add many, many people, it diminishes the togetherness. But if a balabais is sitting around his family, not only his bnei bais, and you're a guest, they're loy. Loy means even if they're not reclining, the fact that the meal is being eaten with the balabas there and the other bnei bayis around, that makes them together, even though if they didn't say the words, come, let's sit over here, even though they're not reclining, even bisman chazal, when normally they would recline, the presence of the balabayis eating with his group, that in itself is koiveya them to be a group. Beautiful, huh? Look inside the Pnei Moshe, the second line under the Gemara. B'shvua ben hi masnisa, b'sudas mila, which is called Shavua Habein, a week, even though it's really not a week, it's after the week. Only Bahu the Ktani the Chol Shaloi Hesevu, that if they're not reclining, when you have like a party today, you have many people. What happens nowadays? Let's say about mitzvah. What happens? You have many people. You know what the balabas is busy doing? He's running around. He's making sure you have what to eat, that you have a plate. Whereas when the balabas is acting as the mishamesh, he's not with them. By the way, even then, if they're reclining, then one guy makes a bracha for everyone. But since the balabas is not there, it's considered disjointed. It's good to know, even though you can argue, you're kidding, everyone is there for the same reason. Doesn't matter. Everyone is there to give cover to the balabas and a chanami, but they're not together. The balabas is not there. Okay, that's the Pnei Moshe. Now, I not accepting the Rabbi Shua ben Levi that afilu balabayis b'toich beisoi, the way they are sitting will make a difference. That means if they are reclining, then echad mevarach l'kulam. Even if the balabas is there, if they are not reclining, Gavaldik, they're not considered joined together. Now, Rabbi Shua ben Levi is arguing with Atana, Kasher Famais. Bottom line, the Charedim says around 7-8 lines before the bottom of the Amid that there is a machlokes. He brings in Toisvis and Bavli, whether we paskin like Rabbi Shua ben Levi or whether we paskin like Rabbi. And now let's go more into how people would eat in the times of Chazal. Like we mentioned in the intro, you didn't just go and eat. There was a whole Seder. Tani we learned in the Brais. Seder Su'uda. How great is that? Orchim nechnasim v'yoshvim ala safsolim v'ala katedroyos. Like we mentioned, don't think they didn't have chairs then. They didn't have chairs the way Americans have chairs with the back. That I get. But there used to be stools. There would be benches. There would be, okay, not only couches or rugs. In the pre-meal area gathering, for Ray it's called, I know many fancy chasanas, you do that. There is prior entering the dining room, right? People gather around and they serve food. Informal, and you have some mamish. That's how it was by every suda. So when the guests would only be entering the pre-meal location, it's not the dining room area, and they would be sitting not on a couch, not a reclining, but the way we would sit now, whether it's on a safsal, whether it's on a katedrois, and they would be there. Shekula, Wisconsin. They would wait until everyone gathered. Okay. Now, what would happen then, guys? They would be served wine and mezoinis. So I guess the Seder was wine came first. That's exactly what we're learning in the Mishnah, since they're not reclining. And even though, by the way, they are gathering to eat a meal together, the fact that this is not the meal, this is pre-meal, they're also not considered together. And therefore, what would come after the wine? They would bring pastries. They would bring parperes. They would bring pasaba bekisnin. Now we're going to learn something that, right, I'm giving you guys a heads up. What we're learning now, no one paskin likes. But what happened then? That heviu lahem mayim liyodayim. This is prior to them eating pas haba bekisnin. And I want you to know that, again, we don't paskin that way. Nowadays, if you're making hamoitzi, you have to do netilas yadayim and wash both of your hands. Nukuda. When you're having pas haba bekisnin, however you'll define that, if you're making a mazoinus, what do you do nowadays? You don't wash at all. In this Braisa, and in those days, there were those who followed an opinion that since you're eating pasa baba kisne, and some people, if they would be koveya suuda, they would have to make a bona fide netilas yadayim both hands, even though you're not being koveya suuda, you're only having this as a pre-meal appetizer, you are only going to make a mazoinus, you would wash one hand. The hand that will be you that you're using to eat that pasa baba kisne. So they would bring wine, then they would bring the mayim, liyodayim, and kol echad v'echad noita, like we just said, only yodoi achas, in the kuda, and very important. Washing the hands for peiros, even in the times of Chazal, was called gasei ruach. We're only speaking about a unique thing that we're not familiar with, which pasa baba kisne. You have to wash one of your two hands. Yeah, and I want to just quickly turn to Daf Samach Ches Amud Beis. We're going to come back. I want to read inside the last white line on top of the Gemara in the Charedim, the fourth line from the top. V'kosav Mahari Kairo the Beis Yosef, right? Not in the Shulchan Aruch, means on his commentator on the Tur or the Chaim Simon Kufnun Ches. Shekol hapoiskim cholken olav b'shteihem v'loy tzarech natila afilu yad achas loy b'shoyse v'loy b'pasa b'bekisnu. Just to make it clear that we already paskin, we don't do this. But let's go back to the Brais. I'm going back to the Samach Ches and the Amud Aleph on the bottom. So they would wash their hands, and then evio lehem parperes. And this parperes, the way we're learning pshat, was a dafka mezoinus. If it would be the way we had the Rashi Tosfos, we already spoke it out 2 days ago, 3 days ago. It's not a shahakal, guys. We're not talking about a fowl, a partridge, or whatever it was. We're speaking about pasababakist. Okay, so that was that. And here again, the Daf Samach Ches Amud Beis, kol echad v'yerech mevarech la'atzmai. Why? That's the Mishnah, because they're not reclining. This is not their meal. This is free meal. Now, at a certain point, they went up. They went up into the dining area, and that's clear. Another thing of olu. Olu can mean they went up on the bench, on the couch, on the bed. But what we'll see clear, it's not that it wasn't the same environment. And they went from stools, from benches, pre-meal appetizers, to now they can go on the couches to recline. It was b'shinui makim, as we'll see in a moment. Now they went into another location, and on there, they didn't sit down on a chair. They went up on a couch, and they reclined. Now wine is brought again. That was the minig. And you can argue, they made a bracha on the wine before. Shinui makim. It's amazing. The brachas that you made in that environment, simply by the fact that you went into another room, are not effective for this environment. Nevertheless, sarich levarich al hasheni, right? Sarich levarich al hasheni. Charedim, 8 lines from the top of the Amid. Afal pi shesheninu. Come on, we just learned to the Mishnah. Halacha hey that berach alayin shalifni hamazon poitras again even shalachar hamazon, even shalachar hamazon before benching David balachar hamazon. But kol shchein that this wine was even before the real meal. Shani hacheh, here it's different because the kivin the olav sevu, since they went up, meaning they went to another makom, havalei shinui makom. Kaimel and perek arvim psachim. Shinui makom sarich levarich. Okay. Now I know some people might insist that nowhere is it written they went to another room. Some people might say that the very fact that there was couches and they went up to a couch, maybe that's the shinui makim. I don't think it's that way, but let's leave that open. Let's just get familiar with the concept that when you change halachically your makim, you got to make a new brach. But now, no, on one hand, you have to make a brach again. On the other hand, now we kick in the Mishnah. Now everyone is reclining. When everyone is reclining, now we said ve'echad mevarich al yedei kulam. And let's go further. Now what happens? Heviu lehem li yodayim. Now they bring water to wash. Afal pi shenatal yoda achas, even though they already washed their hand, one of their hands before, like we mentioned. Sarach lito, both of your hands, and not to think that since they already washed one hand, they were yoitze. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. That's the whole vart. Now the question is, why not? They already washed one of their hands. Why do they have to wash both of their hands? So says the Charedim from the Rashba, where the Charedim is like 19, 20 lines from the top of the Amid. It's towards the end of the narrow lines. Right? Charedim divrei maschal afapi shenatol yodei achas that loy tema ato shebolechol pas dalei b'shiito only hashenis. No. El shteim tzarich. Why? Upeidah sharash b'hatam b'shum debe'inan taketh l'netila birchas hamoitzi. And the Yad Rishayim lo haisnu t'lasa taketh. Beautiful. That's why it's completely erased, and you got to wash both of your hands. Now, what happened? Look how much they ate, guys, before they ate. So now they're already invited. They didn't eat. They washed. Heviu lahem. 1 second. And that's it. Now, when it says that they brought parperes, it cannot mean that they washed for hamoitzi and now they brought parperes. Because if they washed for hamoitzi, then birch halapas patarasa parperes. The Brais is saying that the fancier people, sometimes after they would be already on the couches and after they would bring wine, they would serve 3 appetizers before they washed. And now we're going to learn in that case, if after they drank the wine, not after they washed, before the washing, they're having the real meal, they brought for them the parperes. Here again, they are reclined together. The bracha that they made on the parperes in the other environment doesn't work. Shinui makom. On the other hand, they are reclining. Now, the final thing the Braisa says, like we mentioned, and the Charedim, I'm not going to read it inside, but the minig is that they would serve, the fancier people would serve 3 appetizers and then they would wash. Now, the question is, again, of etiquette. Until what point can a late-comer guest be allowed even to enter? When they would serve a pre-meal appetizer, everything went. Then we'd bring out another one. Everyone ate it up. Nothing left. They would bring out a third one, then they would wash. If an oireach would come at least after 2 appetizers, but there is 1 appetizer left, the balabayis would not be ashamed that this oireach is not having anything for his pre-meal appetizing meal because there is 1 thing left. Once they would serve all of the 3 appetizers, that was it. And since it was common for all of the appetizers to be eaten up, if a guest would come, you can say, well, come on, the guest says, I don't care, let me just wash. No one just washed. They had this whole hachana to a meal. So the balabais is going to become ashamed that there's nothing for the guests. So what's the solution? If you don't come before at least the 3rd appetizer, you're not allowed to come and join the meal. Okay. What? Huh? Well, very good, David. It means that the chevra would tell him, can't enter.
Okay. Rabbi, that
yes.
seems a little harsh, no?
Yes, that was the no. In other words, it's harsh for our culture. You know, so many things right now don't apply practically, but the concept applies. Let me say like this. Let me apply this, that if I am going to be coming to a place, Vlad, where my being there, for whatever reason, is going to be shaming the balabayis, I should not go there. It's not just about me, about I'm hungry, and now I have a place where to eat. Okay, now let's go to Shinui Makom, and we're going to, like we spoke on in the intro, that in Masechtas Bavli, in Masechtas Sukkah, in Sukkah Bavli, Daf Memches, where don't confuse Chutz La'aretz, where we dafke eat in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, because Shmini Atzeres might be the 7th day from the 16th day of Tishrei. Even though now we don't have a suffix, but it's minig avosenu b'yodeinu. The Eretz Yisrael, where we know when the 15th day of Tishrei is, Basukkah is Teishvu Shivas Yamim, and Teishvu doesn't only mean to eat, as we know. Teishvu means that we live in the Sukkah. It was also common for people to build their sukkahs on their rooftops. There's more ventilation, so they would go up to the sukkah. They would bring over there all of the nice furniture from their home, all of the nice kalim into their home. And now the question, and like we mentioned in the intro, on the 8th day, of course, if you can eat in your house, matoy v'manoy. But if you don't have where to eat in a house, or if it's so much more pleasant on the roof versus the house, because the house is stuffy, because the house is little, and the rooftop is more geschmack, that's what we're going to get to. So then, could you eat the 8th day in the sukkah? 2 issues. If a person is eating bikavana to sit in the sukkah, even if he doesn't make a bracha, that is a violation biblically of Bal Toisef. But even if the person has no kavana to do the mitzvah of sukkah, he's eating in the sukkah because it's more pleasant there. He's eating in the sukkah on the rooftop because he doesn't have where else to go. There is a modest ayin issue, and that has to be resolved. Now remember that the 7th day is not Yom Tov. I know it's a Shana Rabbah. On Yom Tov, you cannot take the sukkah part. That's called soiseh. You can take the sukkah part on the 7th day. But don't forget, on the other hand, on the 7th day, you still have to eat in the sukkah. So that's how the Mishnah, like, what do you do? So Tamon, Tanin over there, and Sukkah Bavli Memches, we learned Sukkah Shiva, Ketzad. When the Mishnah says Sukkah is only for 7 days. Ketzad means, what do you do on the 7th day? You can't leave the whole Sukkah up, because there is also, you want to get ready for the 8th day. If you're going to eat downstairs, all of your furniture is there. So says the Mishnah, Gamar milachol, once you ate what you think at the time is your final meal on the seventh day, whenever that is, you're eating 4 p.m., right? Erev Yom Tov. You're eating 2 p.m. Erev Yom Tov. Let me correct myself, because really, Erev Yom Tov, it's better for you not to eat right after Plaga Mincha, at least not to begin the meal after that. So you can't completely dismantle your sukkah altogether. Why not? Because, like we said, it's not just about eating in the sukkah. If you want to take a nap, where do you have to take a nap? In your sukkah. What happens if you're going to decide to have another snack? You're going to have it in the sukkah. So don't take your sukkah apart, but begin being machabed shmini atzeres avol moidet hu asakelim in a mincha ulamayla. Mincha means mincha katana, which is the shah ois mani ois 3:30 p.m. Bring your furniture down, right? And why are you doing that? Mishum kavoid yom tov ha'achrain, and you're good to go. Now, no, it's the Mishnah speaking about a person that will not be eating on the sukkah and Shmini Atzeres. Comes along the Gemara, and the Gemara says, like, guys, let's remember the names. No matter how far we'll get, we're going to have to review the names to know who says what. That Rab Abba Bar Kahana, in the name of Rav Chia Bar Ashi, some have the gears of B'Shem Rav. So we're going to quote the Shita, just in the sake of everyone's girsa, Rab Chia Bar Ashi's opinion. Okay, so here says the Amoira, and what is he addressing? He's addressing, number one, if you only have the rights to the rooftop, you, for whatever reason, you don't have where to eat your meal on Shmini Atzeres in any place other than on the rooftop in the sukkah. Or says the Charedim that isukasai areva olav. It means it's sweet, it's pleasant, you're living in LA. The outdoors is beautiful. Inside the house can get stuffy if you don't have air conditioning. So you're thinking, I don't want to eat in my house, even for that, like we mentioned. And even if you're not having kavana l'shem mitzvah sukkah, so you're not violating Bal Koisef, there's marasayin. So Rab Chia Bar Ashi will give you the solution that it shouldn't be marasayin. What's the solution? Tzarech adam lifsel sukkasim ba'egyoy, like we mentioned before. Tapasal yisuk on Shmini Atzeres, that's the malach of sois. Certainly also midrabanan, even though it's not constructive to be not sois and almanas live nice, but you can't do it midrabanan. Now, how do you pasal your sukkah? How do you pasal your sukkah? So interestingly, writes the Charedim that you have to remove 4 by 4 of the schach. Arba'a is 4 tvachim. I just want you guys to know that halachically, if there is a vacuum of 3 by 3, your sukkah is possible. Make no mistake. Remember these dinim? 4 by 4 is if you have schach psula. If there's complete, empty, even 3 by 3 is a problem. But that we learned that in sukkah, that the whole issue is marasayin. You want to make sure that no one thinks the sukkah is kosher. When you remove the minimum 3 by 3, it might look like it's less than 3 by 3. When you remove arba, that's what the Charedim means to say by arba. In other words, it has to be clear that the sukkah is possible. That is his solution. He has no other solution. Now, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi might argue, might not argue. We'll learn pshat in a moment. He says no. He says, now, whether he says you don't have to do it, or whether he says b'di'evid, he has another solution. Okay, what's his other solution? You didn't passel your sukkah. And even if it's not pshat, you don't have where to go. It's more pleasant to eat on the roof. You're not having kavana, but there's marasayin. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi is coming with a new thing. The solution for marasayin isn't dafke to passel your sukkah. You know what the solution is? Sarech lekadesh b'toich beisai. You make kiddush inside. When a person is looking at you, they see that you're not being moisiv in the day of sukkah, not even a marasayin. Because if you would think that you have to sit in the sukkah even on the 8th day, then you would not be allowed to make kiddush in any place other than in the sukkah. The fact that you make kiddush b'toich beisai, that resolves the marasayin. Now you have the link between the sukkah and our sukkah. You know what the problem is? Before we get to kiddush b'makam suda, problem is that we just said that when you have shinu makim, that's it. Now you got the whole sukkah. Oh, now let's go. So first of all, guys, remember, keep on a low shelf. Rab Chia Bar Ashi solution, parceling the sukkah. Versus if it's a versus Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi who says that you don't need to be, you don't have to apostle your sukkah, simply make kiddush in your house. Remember this machlokes. We're going to learn now another machlokes. We're going to see if how much they are or not linked. So now says the Gemara like this: Rabbi Yachav bar Acha in the name of Shmuel. We're going to quote now Shita Shmuel. But this is not in the case of our Mishnah, but it will affect the case of the Mishnah. That you should know that kiddush b'bayizeh and the nimlach lechol b'bayis achar, whenever you should know you have to recite kiddush a second time in your new place. This is the classic rule. Kiddush b'makom suda. Not talking about kiddush and you have mezainis. You made kiddush. V'nimlach means when you made kiddush, you thought you're eating here. You made kiddush, there was food on the table. Normal. You made kiddush, v'bayizeh. And then you after, I don't want to eat, I'm going to eat there. Fine, gesundheit hate. When you go over there, you got to make kiddush again. Now, Rav Acha bar Chinana says, now I know there's two gersois. We have either Yehoshua or we have over here Oishai. We're going to quote Rabbi Yeshua because we're going to be learning a lot. Today we're going to learn one approach in the Gemara. We have time for this, the Mara Fulda. And God willing, tomorrow we're going to begin learning the Pnei Moshe, which has a whole different approach. They say Rabbi Yeshua. So we're going to just go with the Girsa, even though it's amended and L'chayda, they did a great job to Ois V'Hadar. It probably is Hoshaya, but at that time, the Pnei Moshe didn't know that. So we're going to read Rabbi Yeshua. So now we have Shmuel versus Rabbi Yeshua. That's how we're going to word it. He says, Mi shesu kosei areva olav, the Kaddish leil yom teva achar mutoich beisoi, and v'oil v'oichel b'toich su kosei. Does this not appear that he's saying mamish like who? Like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. But he said it when he heard what Shmuel said. In other words, what was he trying to say? There's two ways of learning what he was trying to say. Yeah, Danny, the simple is he's repeating Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. But he didn't say it when he was learning the Mishnah. He said it when he heard Shmuel. Shmuel says, make kiddush b'makom zev, and nimlach you ate over there, you got to make kiddush again. So he comes along, and Rabbi Yeshua, and he says, hold on. He says that when you make kiddush b'toich beisoi, it resolves the issue. Is he arguing with Shmuel? Is he telling Shmuel that no, that even though you were Mishana Makoim, we don't have an issue, you don't have to make kiddush, because if you have to make kiddush again, sounds like, then this is not a solution. So there's two ways of understanding what he's doing. The first approach is Amar Rab Avun, the first approach, that Veloy Pligin, that Rabbi Yeshua is not coming to argue with Shmuel. And now we're going to Daf Samach Tes. We are going to read the Girsa of the Mara Fulda today. We're going to read the Mara Fulda, and tomorrow we're going to take up the same line and we're going to read the other Girsa. Happens to be that inside the Pnim of Ois V'Hadar, he has the Girsa of the Pnei Moshe, and it's Minakotze El Akotze. So I'm going to read now the version that we have, the Girsa, that Ma Demad Rabbi Yeshua. I'm going to just go with Rabbi Yeshua. Look inside the top Mara Fulda. That which that Rabbi Yeshua, what did Rabbi Yeshua say? No, you go to the roof, you make it in the roof. That's Bishahoya, not Bishaloya. I know in our Gemara it says Bishaloya. It doesn't work. Bishahoya b'datoi lechol b'bayis acha. Very simple. Uman damar Shmuel is Kishaloy hoya b'dato lechol b'bayis. Let's read inside the Maraful. Amar Rabbi Yeshua b'shedatoi garsina, and not the way we have it in our Gemara Bishaloy hoya b'datoi. And tomorrow we're going to learn the Girsa of Bishaloy hoya b'datoi, as you can learn. We see in the Pnei Moshe has a different understanding of the Gemara. Godas harash like this. There's no mention of you needing to have mezainis on the table. You make kiddush. If you have in mind to eat in another place, oz ein tzarech lekadeshenis. K'moi besuka. That whole solution of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that shoya b'datoi b'shas kiddush shaloi lechol b'beisoi, because areva loy, you enjoyed eating on the roof. Elama, you have a marasayin issue. So when you made kiddush, you had in mind to eat on the roof. You're just doing an act to make it clear that you're not saying that you're chayv to eat another day in the sukkah. Hilkach ein tzarech lekadeshenis, and the al karcha chachis Rabbi Yeshua, because the ein tzarech lekadeshenis, because the im loy kain, the whole solution of making kiddush is so when a person will look at you in the sukkah, he's going to say, you started without kiddush. He'll know you made kiddush in another place. If you're going to have to make kiddush again, then being Mekadosh Mebei, so it doesn't solve the Marasayan. That's why he does, because when you make Kiddush, that's a given. No one is choishish that you're not making Kiddush. You can't enter and eat without making Kiddush. She knew you made Kiddush, not on the sukkah. The Imkain, and Kanakeda. Sheyoinu, the Kiddush, also Mabayis, will have a Kiddush. If your Kiddush is invalidated, then the whole Marasayan is not a solution anymore. Elavadai, the ain't Tzarech Lekadoshenis. But you should know that Veloy Palekad Shmuel, because the who Shmuel might have Bishahoy Benati Lechatchila Kusubisokos. Knows if a person lechatchila had in mind, I'm sorry, this guy over here had in mind to eat in the soup, not where he made kiddush. Masha Enken Shmuel used the words nimlach. Nimlach means when he made kiddush, he had in mind to eat in the place of the kiddush. Here, if you're nimlach and you change your place, you got to make kiddush again. Beautiful. To be continued. So tomorrow. Oh, the question is, does Rabbi Shua ben Levi Bechlal even argue with Rabbi Chia bar Ashi? No, it's another. We're gonna close this tomorrow.
In the day, we understand.